I was home playing the guitar. They tried to contact me, but my phone was on silent, so they contacted my wife. And the difficult duty for the officer was to inform her that our son had just passed away. The trucker, seeing what happened, pulled over to the side. He said he faded fast.
This is the Lost Child Podcast, where we delve into the topic of losing a child. These are real stories from real people, sharing some of their darkest moments with us and their journey from that fateful experience. If you're grieving, I hope that you find hope and healing in these stories and you can relate to some of them. If you're supporting someone that's grieving, hopefully you can gain insight into what they're thinking and feeling. As a reminder, our guests are sharing some of their most guarded and precious spiritual and emotional experiences with us. Please keep that in mind when making comments on the video or the podcast. We have a guest with us here today, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his story. Let's dive into the podcast. So first off, thank you, Marlon, for coming over and taking the time to be with us here in the Sunny Room and tell us a little bit about your story. To get things started, can you just tell us how many kids you and your wife actually have?
Yes, we have our oldest son, Ryan, about whom we will talk today.
Okay.
And then we have our twin sons, Nicholas and Matthew. They're 40 years old, 40 or 41. Then we have our daughter, Emily, who's 25.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Ryan, and you said that we're going to be talking about him. Ryan's the one that actually passed away, yes?
Absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit maybe about Ryan, like who he was as a person, what you remember about him?
Yes. Ryan, we had such a close link, close enough that it hit me so hard that when he passed away, that I gathered my family together in family prayer after he passed away. And I didn't anticipate saying what I'm going to tell you that I said, but the first words that leapt from my mouth, "Oh, dear Heavenly Father, I've lost my hunting bud, and I just don't know what to do."
Mm-hmm.
And I paused for a few moments to gather my thoughts, and it was a very thoughtful, very heartfelt prayer on behalf of not just myself, but our whole family. And so we were very, very tight, very, very close. As a father-son combination, we would go hunting a lot for reptiles and just spend a lot of time in the great out of doors. And he was a very, very smart, he is. I'll speak of him in the present, because he's still there. Just not where I am right now. He's in a different place. But he's smart. He's intelligent. He was getting A's on very, very difficult courses like calculus and heavy-duty science classes, and he was headed towards dental school to follow in my footsteps. And he was just getting ready to take the DAT, the dental aptitude test, at the time that he passed away. Had he lived, he would have been a dentist now for 12 years.
Oh, wow.
But he was very kind and thoughtful. There was one time where my wife was having a hard time one day when I was at dental school, and he recognized that. He was about 5 or 6. It was the stormy time of the year where a lot of the trees were being blown with the wind and the leaves were falling off the trees. So he went outside, knowing that she was having a hard day. He had the presence of mind as a 5 or 6-year-old to go outside, and he gathered together some leaves, some large oak leaves, and there was a brown one, there was a yellow one, and an orange one. And he brought these 3 leaves in, and he handed them to his mother, and he said, "Here, Mom, I hope these leaves will help you to feel better."
That's super sweet.
So that sensitivity that he had to others around him going through difficulty remained with him.
Yeah. And
he was able to use that later in his life when he served as a missionary not in Argentina, but in Brazil. I served in Argentina.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite hunting story or memory that you have with him? Because you said that your prayer was, "I lost my hunting buddy."
Yeah.
That must have been a big thing to you guys. So do you have a special memory of you guys hunting together?
Absolutely. All of them. We went to West Texas. We would go for a period of 9 to 10 days almost every year after year. And we would cruise the roads of the desert during the nighttime, hunting for things to photograph.
Oh, just to take pictures of. Hunting-wise is not necessarily shooting
And we were looking for what were called gray-banded king snakes because we
Okay.
were in the pet trade, and we would actually capture males and
wow.
females, breed them, and
Yeah.
sell the babies to private collectors.
Oh, wow.
But even if we went there and didn't find our target species, it was just fun. The desert comes alive during the nighttime, and we just see all of these mammals out there and all these reptilian species. And one time, the first time we went down to a place called River Road in the Big Bend area of Texas, there's no air pollution there and no light pollution there, and it's the clearest sky that I've ever seen.
Wow.
And so the Milky Way is just so incredibly visible. And my son Ryan thought, he was 12 years old. He said, "Dad, what are those clouds up in the sky?" I said, "Son, those are stars. That's the Milky Way." So we were hunting for reptiles at the place where the Milky Way is as milky as it gets.
Wow.
That's super cool.
And so on our last trip there, this was like our 9th trip. In the aggregate, we probably spent well over 100 days together hunting for reptiles and just kicking around in the desert in West Texas. I said to him, and I was 49 at the time, and he was 27. And I said, "Ryan, can you imagine us doing this like when I'm 100 and when you're like maybe just 25 years my junior?" And he said, "You bet, Dad." But little did he realize that 5 months later, the Lord would call him to the other side of the veil. And that's what happened.
And where did you live at? And so you would take a trip to West Texas. Where were you guys living
Yeah,
at
we
the
lived
time?
in Sacramento.
In California
In
at the time.
California.
So would you fly or drive?
We would fly from
Okay.
Sacramento to El Paso. Then we would always stop at Whataburger
Yeah.
at the beginning of our trip because they did not have Whataburger in California. And that was like
I've
my
had
favorite
Whataburger
burger.
one time. I was not a fan.
Oh, really?
I don't know. Everyone talked it up and I ate it and I wasn't, but it's great that you guys had that special thing. It's just a funny
Yeah.
thing for me. I was all excited to go eat at it and it just wasn't good.
So they say that when you're planning an anticipated trip, your
Yeah.
endorphins go through the roof.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's a good feeling knowing, hey, we have this coming up, and you kind of work towards it,
Yeah.
you prepare for it, and then you're on your trip. And even if you don't find your target species that you're looking for, it's just fun being out there as a father-son experience.
And the reason why I asked where you lived, because a trip to West Texas and even like stopping at Whataburger and other things seems like that would be a just genuine, fun, good time. Because you'd have that whole time on the airplane.
Yep.
Any rental car, anything you had, any time staying in a hotel, whatever it wasn't like he was somewhere else, you were somewhere else, and then you met to go do this. It was a journey that you did together while you're going to West Texas.
In fact, leading up to the trip, I would both he and I would do this. Just out of the blue, he'd be passing by me at home, and I'd say, "Texas." And then the next day, he'd say back to me, "Dad, Texas. We're going to Texas." So it was like it was our deal, So
Yeah.
that's why
Was it at the same time period? Was it always in the summer, or was it?
it was always in the month of June or
Okay.
July. Those are the best times to go out there when these creatures are kind of leaving the ground and they're coming above the ground to hunt for food or to breed or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're highly sought after. So, we're really happy when we found them. We found 9 of them together. And I've also hunted with our daughter, Emily, and with one of my twin sons, Nicholas. And in the aggregate, we've actually found 23 of them through the years.
Wow.
That's cool.
So I'm continuing to do with one of my twin sons and with Emily what I did with Ryan for so many years.
Yeah.
We're continuing that family thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
it's really
awesome.
fun.
So besides hunting, what other activities and hobbies did Ryan like to do?
He was a football player.
Was
He
he?
was a big kid. He was 6'2". He was a brute.
What position did he play?
He played lineman, and he played on offense and
Offensive
defense.
and defense, okay.
And he was a really good football player. He loved to work out at the club. He would say, "Dad, I'm going to go buff some more iron." And so it was just a real great pastime of him. And so he actually got me into weightlifting, and it was another thing that we did together as father and son.
Wow.
And so we were both benching around the same weight. And, I had done like 330 or whatever, and he was working up there. So he bench pressed about the same that I was bench pressing. And I left those weights that he lifted 2 or 3 weeks before he passed away. I left those weights on the bar in our garage for like a few years.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's just, that was symbolic of something that we did together. And I did not want to take those weights off of that bar for a long time. I just couldn't fathom doing it because it gave me a feeling every time that I would go through that door into the garage and see the weights set up out there, and I'd see what he last benched before he passed away. That was kind of something that I was clinging to a little bit.
Yeah.
So did he play high school football and then college football, or
No,
just
he
high
didn't play
school?
college football.
Okay.
He played only high school. Yeah.
Did he get recruited at all to potentially go play in college? Or
No,
was that a goal of his or anything?
No,
or
he
just-
really wasn't. He was more like concentrated on after I get out of high school, I'm going to get my education.
Yeah.
Well, first on his list was to serve a mission. So he served his mission. Then he started, taking some college courses and things leading towards going to dental school.
Yeah.
And he had stated early on that was really his desire, that he wanted to be a dentist too.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he would have been had he lived.
Did he ever job shadow you, or did he just recognize kind of what you had done as a dentist and like your lifestyle? So he emulated that, or
He came to work and he watched me work, and he had really difficult wisdom teeth. There's no HIPAA things going on here because he's on the other side, right? So I can talk about this. But so I took out a couple of his wisdom teeth, and I was just sweating, and they were so hard. And I said, son, your other two that I haven't removed yet, they haven't bothered you at all, ever, have they? And he said, no. So I decided, I made an executive decision to not remove those wisdom teeth. But they bothered him on his mission.
Oh, no.
And he ended up going to an office where he got an infection. And so he chided me by sending me this little bubble pack. And I'm saying, dude, what's in here? So I pop it open, and out falls 2 wisdom teeth onto the table. And then he told me later, he said, I sure wish you had taken these out in your office because I got an infection in this office down in Brazil. So it's interesting.
Dang.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about how Ryan died? I honestly know nothing about the story.
Absolutely.
Can you...
It's a very interesting story. Okay. He had some friends in Utah. So he took off on one Friday morning with the intent to visit with some friends in Utah. And they were going to have like a party, and there was like a dance and everything.
And he was living down here at the time?
He was living in Sacramento.
Oh, in Sacramento.
In Sacramento with us at the time. This was before we moved here to Arizona. And so he set off on his journey to Utah. And we were able to gather from an individual who was in the area when our son passed away. It was a trucker. There are 2 lanes of traffic on I-80, eastbound and westbound. They're separated by a median. In many areas, the median is rather deep. It's not level. It actually, if you walk into the median strip, it's quite steep. And maybe there's a difference of elevation between the road and the median at the bottom of it, maybe 15 feet. Well, he had his accident at the area where the median was very, very deep. So the trucker reported that he saw our son pass the trucker on the left side. And then he saw our son's car, a Chevy Cavalier, a green Chevy Cavalier had gotten him, that he slowly but surely veered off onto the shoulder. So we surmised that he probably fell asleep at the wheel.
Yeah.
When he got on the shoulder, I think what happened is that he corrected where he was headed, but he did it too hastily.
Yeah.
And the correction sent his car in a 70 mile per hour counterclockwise spin across the highway. And when I went to the spot one day later to gather his personal items that had been strewn on the desert floor where the accident occurred, I could see this arc of tire rubber that was left on the road from when he careened across those lanes and over onto the area that was 15 feet deep. And he tumbled several times, and he was partially ejected from the car because although he had a seatbelt on, he had taken the harness like this and put it only around his belly, and it was not over his chest.
Yeah.
So he's partially ejected. So the trucker, seeing what happened, pulled over to the side and went to our son's aid, and he reported that there was a very thready pulse. And these are the trucker's word. He said he faded fast.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And had he lived, he would have had a condition called flail chest,
Okay.
which dramatically reduces the quality of life that a person experiences. And sometimes they can be wheelchair bound for life or whatever. So that's how he passed away in a single car rollover accident on I-80. It was about 10 miles west of the town, or east of the town of Wells, Nevada. At Wells, Nevada, you go over a little mountain range, and then you go down into what's called Independence Valley.
Yep.
And there's a prison out there on the left-hand side of the road as you're heading towards Utah. And just past that prison, that mile marker 366, which I'll never forget, that's where the event occurred.
And then did you get a phone call from the police, I assume, or what?
Yeah.
How did that transpire?
This was on October the 26th of 2007.
Okay.
So what happened is that I was home playing the guitar, just having a nice evening at home. And my wife went with our daughter to a Halloween party at our church building. They tried to contact me, but my phone was on silent, so they contacted my wife. And the difficult duty for the officer who called my wife was to inform her that our son had just passed away in a single-car rollover accident. So that was the day.
Here's also a reminder to subscribe and follow this podcast on whatever platform you're listening to. Now, back to the podcast.
And then did she then drive home to you? Did she call you? Like, how did that transpire?
She called me and let me know that he had passed away. And so I knew almost as soon as she did. So she came home, obviously, with our daughter very quickly. And I was serving as stake president in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and overseeing about 10 congregations.
Yeah.
Wow.
So my 2 counselors came over, and my bishop came over, and all of my family and friends came over. A lot of people came over. And then they all, went away one by one. Then we were left with our family, and that's when we had our family prayer.
How long did people stay over?
About 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah. Did people say much?
They just, there was a lot of hugging.
Yeah.
A lot of hugging and a lot of crying going on. I called my business partner, Brad Smith. And so with me being Marlon Smith, the name of our business was Smith Dental. Imagine that.
That worked out pretty good.
Very unique, name for a business. But I called my business partner just to show the kind of a relationship that we had. He said, Marlon, I want you to put all of the funeral costs on our corporate, he said because it was ours, our corporate credit card, and we'll work together to pay that off.
Holy cow.
That's the kind of relationship that we had. We were like brothers.
Yeah.
And found out after we started working together that we're actually related
Oh, wow.
through our mother's maiden name lines, not through the Smith
Oh,
lines.
really?
Yes.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
So you drove out there the next day then and saw what
The
had
next
happened?
day, I took one of my twin sons, Matthew, who is a firefighter in California now,
Okay.
and his wife, Fernanda, from Brazil. I took them with me and made the trip. I call it the trip.
Yeah.
I spontaneously broke out in grief-filled tears many, many times on the way to that site. And we knew where it was. His car had already been towed away, but we were told it was around mile marker 366. We had asked in order to be prepared. And my intent was to go there to hopefully find some of his belongings that might have been strewn from his vehicle in the median strip.
Yeah.
And it was unreal. We were there exactly 24 hours after he passed away. What a difference 24 hours can make. My intent was to find anything that belonged to him that was not in the car, because we had the opportunity to look through the car that they had hauled back to Wells, Nevada,
Yeah.
in a wrecking yard. And I found a lot of things of Ryan lying on the desert floor. I found receipts of some of the last things that he bought, a couple of candy bars and a soda. Mm-hmm. I found a bleaching syringe that I had given him from my dental office to brighten his teeth up. I found like a parking pass at the school that he was going to further his education.
Yeah.
I found like a grip thing for his arm because he loved to keep his forearm strong.
Yeah.
And a few other things of his. I found a pen of his. And as I was gathering these things, the Spirit of the Lord was giving me a lot of clarity. Mm-hmm. What am I supposed to do with these things of Ryan that I'm gathering together? I'm going to use these for the eulogy. So when I gave his eulogy, which was
You were the one that gave it?
I gave it. I wanted to. I needed to.
Yeah.
For me, that I needed to have that experience.
Yeah.
After what had happened. And I felt really good about it too. But everything that I found of his on the desert floor represented a part of his eulogy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the parking pass stood for his educational pursuits. The pen stood for his journal. He followed my example in writing in journals. And he wrote lots and lots of things while he was serving as a missionary and after he came home from his mission. And I shared several excerpts from his journal during the giving of his eulogy, you see. So everything stood for a part of his life. The hand exerciser stood for his sports endeavors, and liking to go to the club and buff iron, you know. So it was a very, very interesting experience. And I had not finished what I needed to do there. Grief includes work. So there's two things that I did on the short term, on a little bit longer term, to help with the grief.
Yeah.
Number one, I decided I needed to tackle his room and decide what I was going to take of his that I didn't want to keep and donate to charities,
Yeah.
and what I wanted to keep to form like a special Ryan trunk. And we still have those items to this day.
Yeah.
And so it was hard, but I said I had read that in order for me to go through the grieving process, I had read this saying, an old African saying that goes something like this: the only way out of the desert is through it.
Yeah.
When you're in the middle of the desert, you just can't will yourself to be outside of the desert. You've got to make those steps, and it's work, and you got to go through it. You got to go through the experience. So
The interesting thing about that, to draw that analogy the same, is time marches forward no matter what you do. Right? So if you're stuck in the middle of the desert, guess what? The next day is going to happen. The next day is going to happen. And the next day is going to happen. So the only thing is you can choose a path to start walking.
yeah,
Right? Because as much as you want to stay in that time, as close to that time when Ryan passed, it can't exist because time just continues to march forward.
it does. But if you remain motionless, it's like you can get a whale of a sunburn out there in the desert for being there day by day. You better cover that head of yours because it's going to be a really hard experience. So I had learned in what I had read, even before Ryan passed away, I had an interest in it because as a leader of a stake, which is, for those who don't know, a group of congregations in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so I knew that I had to help the people who were going through this kind of experience. And I had presided at many, many funeral services, both as a bishop and as a stake president in my church before this happened to us. And it took on a new light. It was a new way to think about it when you actually have gone through that yourself.
Yeah.
You know? So I knew that I had to work. So the second thing I did is in the Sacramento area, they have a lot of dredging piles where they looked for gold many, many years ago.
Yeah.
And there's these piles of rocks all over the Sacramento area near the American River that represent a lot of work and toil in looking for that precious ore that's in the ground. And so I got a river rock that was very symmetrical, about this size. And I took it to work and I used my dental drill after I stenciled his name and the date that he passed away on the rock. And I actually used a dental drill bit to make inscriptions on the rock of his name and the date that he passed away. And then on April the 26th, which was exactly 6 months after he passed away, I planned this out.
Yeah.
I traveled back to the spot where he passed away, and I planted on that spot. And my wife was with me this time. Planted on the spot where his car was towed away and where he had his accident. I put that rock there. And then we took some wildflower seeds and we just scattered them all about. Well, it wasn't the time of the year that there were any rains or anything going on a lot, but I was hoping that maybe sometime that there'd be a lot of flowers that would like be a memorial to our son there.
Yeah.
And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that in the case of going through his personal items within 2 weeks of him passing away, and then later taking this river rock and putting it there, this requires time. It takes some money, some effort. So these were two things that I did to help me to sort of process this whole thing and to do some sort of work. Because I had read, and I really feel to this day that that was helpful to me to do that kind of work as early as I was able to.
How long did it take you to kind of decommission his room, if you will? Like you went through his room, you said you needed to figure out things you wanted to keep as a memorial and like a memorial chest and then donate stuff. How long did it take you?
About 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Yeah. I did it myself.
Yeah.
It's just something I felt like I needed to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you and your family first cope with everything afterwards? Like how did you personally do it, your wife, and then also your kids?
We prayed a lot.
Okay.
Never a prayer was uttered without a mention of Ryan in that prayer.
Did you ever go through a period of time where you didn't want to pray? That you were just like, I can't pray. I can't do it.
I always prayed. Because of my ecclesiastic position that I held at the time,
Yeah.
I was responsible for about 4,000 individuals within a certain area in the Sacramento area.
Did it ever cross your mind to be like, I can't do this?
Well,
I don't want this responsibility.
I have a story about that I'll share after I answer the first question.
Okay.
And the first question was more, bring that back to me.
How did you guys cope with the immediate
Yeah.
aftermath? You said you prayed a lot.
Yeah, we prayed a lot. And I don't think that any one of us ever experienced that, oh, gee, I don't feel like I want to pray.
Yeah.
Because I received a lot of solace in prayer. And every time that we knelt together as a family and prayed, there was more solace that came to us. It was a lessening of the terrific blow that we were experiencing. Because when we prayed, when we would feel the Spirit in our hearts, we would know that Heavenly Father was listening to us and that He would help us to make our way through this difficult experience. Now, was there a time when I didn't want to do my church work? Oh, yeah. One time. I came home from work about 2 months after our son passed away, and it dawned on me as I was driving home from work, I just cannot do my church work this evening. I had 7 interviews. So I got home, and I knelt at the side of my bed, and I said a prayer to Heavenly Father. And I said, I'm sorry, please forgive me, but it's not in me to do my church work this evening. I just cannot do it. I'm sorry, please forgive me. My intent was to sleep the whole night from 6 in the evening till 6 in the morning.
Yeah.
Because I had found by that time that I would have sometimes happy dreams while I was sleeping.
Yeah.
That was my escape.
Yeah.
I knew I could sleep and not think about it for a while.
Yeah.
And without getting into the particulars, because it actually was a very sacred experience that I should not share all the details of it. But after my prayer, I lay there in my bed with the intent to sleep it off for about 12 hours and get up and go back to work. I did not even have the presence of mind to call my executive secretary and say, by the way, you need to cancel all these people. I was just going to blow
Just
it
go
off.
to bed. Yeah.
That's where I was. It was really hard. I lay in bed and I had not fallen asleep, although it was my intent to sleep for 12 hours. And I became acutely aware that God knew what I was going through. I can't give more detail than that, but I had an experience. And I jumped out of my bed with enthusiasm, and I said, dude, I'm going to go do my church work. Well, there's this term, enthusiasm. It goes back to the Latin. The N part of it, En, at the beginning of enthusiasm, stands for in or within. Enthusiasm part goes back to theos, which means God. So to be enthusiastic means that God is in you. The Holy Spirit placed in me the ability to turn a positive out of that negative for me at that time.
Yeah.
He sent me to do my church work, and He gave me the ability to do it. Was it easy? No. But I'm really grateful I had that experience, and that's one of the compensatory blessings that I received, is knowing that in our deepest trials, that if we ask for help, we have a loving Father in heaven who is going to help us and bless us and help us to see it through this very difficult experience. I had written in my journal, I feel like I've been sucker punched and I just can't get my breath back.
Yeah.
Does that feel real?
Yeah, definitely.
And I also said, the silence is deafening.
Was
But
he
it-
living at home at the time too?
Yeah, he was
While
living at
going to
home with
school?
us. Yes.
And I never said it before, but I'm so sorry that this whole thing even happened. I'm sorry that your wife had to find out by a phone call and you're not next to her when that happened, right? And I'm sorry that your phone was on silent and you didn't take the call. Right? I mean, that would kind of stink too. But with all that said, how did your immediate family
How old were your kids?
how old were your other
Your
kids?
other ones?
Our twins.
And how old was Ryan? We didn't even ask how
Ryan
old
was
Ryan
27.
27, okay.
Ryan was 27. He was divorced.
Okay.
He had one child, Lily,
Oh, wow.
who at his
wow.
funeral services, she was 5 years old. So she came for the funeral services, and his ex-wife came for the services. We had a little get-together at one of the church chapels,
Yeah.
as we are wont to do. And she was so excited, his daughter. She saw a plate of cookies. And this is what she said. "Oh, I love the cookies. I'm going to get one for me and one for Dad." And she stopped just like that.
Oh.
But she realized at her young age that there was something that was different. But she was so excited and she wanted to go get a cookie for her dad.
Yeah.
Very tender experience.
Yeah. I definitely have had, at least in the early aftermath of, because Sunny was 6 when she died.
Mm-hmm.
And so just general parenting stuff, you're like, oh, where are the kids and where are people? And being around some of our family that she would play with and stuff, some of the nieces and nephews and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to correct myself multiple times in the subsequent weeks and months after Sunny's death of like, no, she's not here.
Right.
Like, where's Sunny? Oh, wait, she's not here.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So hard.
Yeah.
Wait, so how old were your
Oh, yeah. How old
your
were the other
twins
kids?
and
So our
your
twin
daughter?
sons were at the time about 23 or 24. And our daughter, Emily, would have been about 7 or 8 years old. This happened
Okay.
16 years ago, and she's 25 now.
Okay.
She was 8 or 9. Very interesting experience is that the morning after he passed away, this was the day that I went to gather his things. But before I left, I woke up with tears in my eyes. But also I woke up and there was something going on. I said, "What's on my head?" And I woke up and here's our daughter, Emily, and she had her little palm on my forehead like this. And I thought, why is she doing this? And I said, "Emily, what are you doing?" And she kept her hand on my head and she said, "Daddy, don't worry. Everything will be okay."
Huh.
There's a compensatory blessing for you.
Mm.
You have one of your children giving you some comfort. And I was really grateful she was there to help with that.
Hey, we'll jump back to the podcast in just a second. I have something special for you right now. Following the death of Sunny, I had a book that was gifted to me. This book right here, Like a River. I think this book is an incredible book. Granger Smith goes into great detail about his experience losing their son, River. Now, I have set up an affiliate link down in the video description or podcast description. By purchasing this book through the link we give you, the Lost Child Podcast will receive a small commission, which will help support the podcast to help more people with hope and healing through their grief journeys. Thank you for your support of the Lost Child Podcast. Now, back to the podcast.
I feel like Tucker was like that for a lot, or like that for us as well. Like he seemed to have more faith than we did in the immediate after fact.
Yeah, in the immediate aftermath,
Or
that he was saying stuff that I was so confused why he was even saying it, because it didn't seem like he gathered enough or had enough understanding. He was saying very gospel oriented things. One of the things, like a Sunday school primary lesson where he like taught the whole primary. I don't know, just stuff that I was like, well, you have way more faith than I have.
He did. I was there. He taught a lesson about Sunny and where she is. And he also taught part of it. He threw in part about how there's the evil one and how the evil one wants to try to drag us down. But then he drew a picture of like an angel up above who would like help you and pull you up to get you away from the bad influence. And I thought this was so great because he was there and he was teaching this lesson and all the kids in the class were there. And kids his age, during this lesson, I saw kids with tears streaming down their faces. His peers had tears streaming down their faces during this lesson. And it was just the right thing to do. I asked him if he would do that as his primary teacher, and he just took over and did really such a great job. Incredible.
Another thing to follow back to Ryan and his daughter, so your granddaughter, do you still have any type of connection with her?
Yes, she lives out of state right now, but she's she's come by at various times in the last several years since we moved here to Arizona, and she would also visit us almost regularly every summer for a while until she got into her teen years.
Yeah.
Then there's a switch that happens at that time, and then their friends become very important to them. But yeah, we've kept in great contact. In fact, the last time that she came over, she had the intent to try to gather some things that were her dad's.
Yeah.
And he brought back from Brazil a lot of things, including a beautiful, beautiful blue butterfly that was encased within a piece of plastic that you would hang on the wall.
Yeah.
And she asked if we kept that displayed anywhere. And I said, no, but I think I can look for it. And she said, oh, please, I want that little butterfly. I always loved that as a little girl. Can you find my dad's butterfly?
Yeah.
So I looked all through the house and I couldn't find it. I was so crestfallen. But then I had this whispering, look again. And I had a feeling where I needed to look. And I looked in a drawer of a certain dresser, and you couldn't see it when you opened the drawer, but it was hidden underneath a lot of stuff.
Wow.
And so I gave that to her. And when I gave it to her, you know what she did? She just started just sobbing. She so wanted that butterfly because it helped her to remember when she's a little girl and how he had shown this to her and talked about, coming back from his mission and what a great time that he had down there in Brazil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful memory that she gets, and being able to have that of memory of her dad. Yeah. The next question kind of deals with the grief cycle and the stages of grief. And to explain that a little bit more, it doesn't necessarily mean that it happens in a linear pattern.
Right.
It's a cycle that can happen over time and just continually going. You can go from one stage to the next and then back to another stage. It's not you went through this stage and now you never visit that one again type of thing. It's not a linear pattern. It's a circular pattern that can go on. Honestly, you could still be in a place of one of those things, or even have a day where some of those come back up. Some of those stages of grief include like denial, meaning this never happened. Another way that we've sensed it and explained it to other people is having some of those days where you're like, how is this my real life? Right? Where it's not necessarily you're denying the fact that it happened, but you're still kind of just like questioning, how is this even real? Anger towards God, anger towards whatever, anger towards the borrow pit or whatever it is, road construction, bargaining. That's some stuff of like, what if I would have called him 10 minutes before? Would I have woken him up and he wouldn't have fallen asleep? Or what, bargaining with God, saying, what if I would have done X? Could I have changed the outcome? Depression, going into some of those deep sadness places where you're unable to get out of, and then also acceptance. Did you feel any of these stages or
I
things
only
of
felt
grief?
only two of them.
Only two.
It was different for me than it's been for some people that I've talked with. I only had two of them. Number one, it didn't take me long to accept it. I accepted it. But the grief, oh yeah. We had a Christmas party for our dental office. And typically, I would take a great leadership role in that along with my business partner. But I felt inclined to let him take the reins on that meeting. And I was there only because I was duty-bound to be there. I did not want to be there.
Yeah.
I felt uncomfortable there. I felt like I didn't want to participate in the meal.
Because the accident happened in
October. And this
So
was
then
like
we're
in early December.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And so we had the thing, and my business partner said a lot of really nice, glowing things, and I recognized that it were nice, glowing things, but it didn't reach my heart. I was somewhere else, and I was thinking about Ryan.
Yeah.
And the grief was so deep. And so I remember thinking, I just can't wait to get out of here and be alone again.
Yeah.
And to maybe say some more prayers and things. So I made my escape as soon as I could, and I went out to the parking lot, and I got in my truck. And the front of my truck faced a major thoroughfare where I'd see all these cars going by in both directions. And I cried for a whole half hour nonstop. I couldn't stop crying. Just cried and cried and cried. And I said, these people going by me in these cars have no
They don't even know.
idea.
They don't even know.
that just yards away is a person having this experience.
Yeah.
And so, oh yeah, the grief. Well, about a month after that, I was playing the guitar one day at home, composing some songs. And I liked a lot of the minor keys when I compose songs. I don't read music, but I play by ear. And so I was composing a song and I was really getting into it. And I said, I love this. And it was very mellow, almost kind of sad.
Mm-hmm.
But in a weird sort of way, writing sad music gave me some sort of comfort because I love music, number one.
Yeah.
And number two, it touches the soul in a way that sometimes other things can't. And so I was in the midst of doing this composition when I felt the Spirit of the Lord say, put down your guitar. So I put down my guitar obediently and I waited for the message, and it came to me so clearly and succinctly. I heard these words, Alma 32.
Mm-hmm.
Well, most members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints understand that Alma chapter 32 has to do with the subject of faith.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I guess I should look up Alma 32. But then the Spirit told me, no, Alma chapter 30, verse 2.
Oh, wow.
It was that explicit.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I looked it up, and it talks about a group of people who had loved ones who passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And in effect, the scripture says, after their days of grief and mourning, there began to be peace in the land. So in the Smith land, the Spirit was telling me, oh yeah, you're in grief. There's a lot of pain. The day's going to come that you're going to have peace that's going to come to the Smith family. And it has come. It came a long time ago. But it wasn't until after a lot of trial and a lot of grief. Being in the middle of that desert, you got to walk through it. You just can't will yourself out of it. You can't make an end run around it.
Yeah.
It's just got to happen. You got to make it happen.
Being where you were at in that mental state, even like at that, the dental practice company Christmas party, and you just didn't want to be there. Did you adjust any of your workload during that time too? Did your you just kept trucking?
No, I kept up on my church calling.
But no, just like actual work though, like your
Oh, yeah.
dental
Dental
practice.
work.
No.
Did you take any break or change your workload there?
I went back. His funeral was on Saturday, and I was back at work on Monday.
Wow.
And we had a morning huddle.
Yeah.
And so I opened my mouth to give some directions, and nothing came out. And the next thing I know, I'm just crying, and everyone else is crying. And one of my assistants got me some flowers. During lunch, she walked across the street because we were right next to the Sacramento River.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even remember what they were, but they're probably like daisies or something like that. But it was such a gesture. It didn't really matter what kind of things they were, what kind of flowers they were. They were flowers that she gathered for me.
Yeah.
So she gave those to me, and typically men don't get flowers, but I was happy to get them. And this was her gesture towards me to say, hey, you know something? I'm with you on this. I understand you're going through a hard time. So that was one of the many things that happened that were helpful to us in our grieving process. Is out of the blue almost, people would show up. They'd want to talk about it with me.
Yeah.
And on the year anniversaries for several years after he passed away, on the 26th of October, I would get a barrage of emails or phone calls or whatever on social media that existed at the time to let me know that they were thinking about us at that time. So that was helpful to know, because when someone else takes notice of the grief that I'm going through or that you're going through, it helps us to understand that it's not just us. It's just not our family that was touched by this. It was so many more people than just our family. So that to me was a real positive aspect and part of what helped us to kind of cope with all of that.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And even just having it, and you think about it too, it also impacted even the people that you worked with.
Yes, it did.
Right? Like any of the friends, family, or acquaintances that you had or your wife had or even your kids had, one small death impacts so many different people, and you don't ever really think about it until you go through that. And then like I had multiple people like call me almost just unconsolable, and I'm the one in the middle of the thing, right? In the middle of this accident with Sonny, but I'm helping them kind of work through some of their grieving that they went through also.
Wow, that's incredible. that's got to be helpful on more than just one level to both the individual you're talking to and to you yourself. Because I remember in my counseling with members of the church who were going through maybe not situational depression like this, but clinically being depressed, we'd make sure that they had the proper medications.
Yeah.
But some of them would be going through, for want of a better term, what I call gospel depression, which is when a person doesn't make right choices and there are consequences that they're suffering because of that. It can cause a depressed feeling, and teaching them how to get out from that, away from that. And part of that is that, if you can find a way to serve other people, I would tell them this is going to help you to feel better and maybe not quite so depressed. And I had so many people that would return and report to me that, something, I'm not out of the woods yet, but I feel a lot better because I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and they would name these acts of service that they had been involved in.
Yeah.
It's almost magical, but there's something about when a person is going through difficulty that they're able to somehow find a way to reach out to someone else. I love the prophet Joseph Smith. I just feel impressed, for whatever reason, to share a story that illustrates what I've just talked about. He was in Carthage jail with his brother Hiram and with a few other individuals, including a man whose name was Dan Jones. And so when he was there in that gathering, in that jail cell, he knew that his life probably was soon to be taken. Well, a shot was heard outside, so he got up from the bed that he lay in and lay on the hard floor. And there's another one on his floor to one of his sides, and his name was Dan Jones. And he said, "Are you afraid to die?" And then Dan says, "Well, in a situation such as this, being with a prophet of the Lord and with others who are part of the Lord's kingdom on the earth, it's not such a bad thing." And then, being full of inspiration, Joseph Smith, while worrying about his own life, reached out to his brother and said, "Dave, you will yet serve a mission to Wales." Well, if you look at the records of the church, he served 2 missions to Wales.
Wow.
And helped many, many people to get out of a very bad place and learn how to live a better, a cleaner, and a more happy life. And then he turns his other arm over to another brother and says, "Here, John, use my arm for a pillow," because they were laying on the hard floor. How did he have the presence of mind while going through this experience, knowing that he was shortly to lose his life, perhaps, to put out his arm to his brother who was in need of a pillow?
Yeah.
And he had a pretty ample bicep to lay, a man's head on, because he was a pretty strong guy, physically as well as spiritually. But that's just an example that I think that when we're in dire straits, if we can find a way to serve, there's something almost magical about serving other people that helps us to get out of the doldrums that we find ourselves in. And so I've learned that.
Speaking about service, prior to Ryan's death, were you somebody that fully accepted service from other people super easily, or was that a difficult thing for you?
No.
Okay.
It's always been easy because I had learned a long time before that you might offend someone who wants to serve you and help you. And some individuals feel like they want to do all the helping, but they don't want people to help them.
Yeah.
But it's a give and take, Yeah. And so I think that we all need to have the experience of being helped by others.
Yeah.
And also, giving help to others. And sometimes we'll find ourselves in a situation where both are happening simultaneously.
Yeah.
Right?
What emotions did you feel the weeks, months, even years after Ryan's death?
I just plain old miss him. I still do to this day.
Of course.
I've gotten to the point where I can talk about that experience without feeling very tearful, although sometimes that still does happen if the situation is right.
Yeah. And it's been 15 years, yes.
Yeah. Part of the grief is not just not having the person close by, but it's not having the opportunity to serve that person the way that we grew to love serving them.
Mm-hmm.
And my son Ron and I had such a great relationship. He was a great teacher. There was one time when he was 8 years old. He had been recently baptized. I was home from work, and I was lying down on the floor of our living room with my head on a pillow watching a very interesting television show. I was totally just enthralled by the developing things in this TV show, and it was coming to an end about 15 minutes later. Everything was coming together. The plot was really thick. And then Ryan, who I'd been studying the scriptures with at that time, It was like a father-son experience with the Book of Mormon, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was there at my side standing up, and I could see his legs there. And I look up and I said, "What do you want, Ryan?" He says, "Dad, can we read again from the Book of Mormon?" And I said, "Well, son," I looked up at the clock. There's about 15 minutes left in this show. How about I finish the show and then we'll do our reading?
Yeah.
And he stood there silently for about 5 seconds. And then he blew me away with these words. He said, "Dad," he's 8 years old now. "Dad, what's more important, that TV show or reading the scriptures together?"
Mm-hmm.
Needless to say, I sprang to my feet, and we went over to a couch, and I can still remember that sofa. We sat down side by side, leg touching leg, and I put my arm around his little shoulders, and we took turn out loud reading alternate verses from that sacred holy record. And I will never, ever forget how it felt with him, with my arm around him at that time.
Yeah.
Never forget it. Always remember it. And so he was a teacher. Even at an early age, he recognized what was most important, and he taught that to me on that day. So the teacher, moi, became the taught by my son, and that was a very interesting experience.
It's a super sweet experience.
Would you say that even in the last year or 2 years that you've had some like really hard days that have just been like overcome with any of that grief or missing him or anything?
No.
When was the last time do you feel like that's
The
probably
last
happened?
time that I had really a hard time and a real struggle with it might have been up to about the 3-year mark.
Yeah.
And frankly, my wife and I have talked about this a lot. She got on an even keel quicker than I did.
Wow.
And I'm grateful to her to this day because she gave me the room and the space that I needed to grieve in the way that I felt that I needed to grieve.
Yeah.
And I did the same for her. And we both have had marvelous manifestations and things that we've been taught and things that we have seen.
Mm-hmm.
But these are some of what I, again, go back to those compensatory blessings. It's been my experience in talking with individuals who are similarly situated that by and by they have some sweetness that is rolled into the experience. And sometimes that's almost unfathomable, they've told me, when in the early going of their experience. But it can instill, hopefully, some hope in the hearts of those who are helping those who are grieving or those who are grieving to know that the day will come when there'll be a brighter light. The day will come when the hardness of the experience will become an experience of very soft edges.
Yeah.
And the time will come when sweetness works its way into the equation. And the greatest comfort that I have is the comfort that I received in the gospel of my Savior Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
In knowing that part of what he did for us in that garden of Gethsemane and upon the cross and in the Arimathean tomb was to enable us when we pass away and when we go to the spirit world as a spirit, that assuredly, as it came to him, the first fruits of them that slept, that we will all go through the experience of having a resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's become much more real to me, that doctrine of the resurrection, and I appreciate it so much more than I ever did before our son passed away. So there's another compensatory blessing. My testimony of that facet of the gospel has been greatly increased and enhanced by what we have gone through. And I believe firmly, because of experiences that I have had, that he was called to a holy purpose on the other side of the veil.
Yeah.
And I see him doing work. I see him being pressed into the Lord's service. And I look forward to that day yet future. And I'm in no hurry to get there, don't get me wrong. There's too much about life that I just love.
Mm-hmm.
I love my job. I love serving in the church. I love my family. I love going with my daughter and one of my twin sons when we do our reptile trips. There's just so much good that's happening. I'm in no hurry to get there, but when I do get there, I look forward to embracing my son and us regaling one another about stories of like lessons taught, testimonies born, hearts touched and souls saved. That's what I look forward to. And I feel because of my faith that I have in this. that is going to happen.
Yeah. With Ryan's passing, how did it maybe shift or adjust any of your family relationships you had? So the relationship with your wife or the relationship with the kids, with either one of your twin sons or your daughter.
Yep.
Did it shift or change any of those relationships?
They became stronger ultimately.
Yeah.
There was more hugging that went on.
Yeah.
There was more listening that went on. There were more heartfelt discussions that took place. My wife and I probably doubled our attendance at the temple.
Mm-hmm.
And after our son passed away, we began to go there on a weekly basis. And I had the kind of job that I didn't need to work 1 day per week, so I would choose Fridays off. And that was our date morning to go to the temple.
Yeah.
And so it was so incredible. And so I thought a lot about where our son was and what happens there and how people continue to learn and grow. And at some point in time, they need to have certain things done for them that we teach in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that can be done for them by those who are living.
Yeah.
So we'd go to the temple to help bless the lives of our ancestors. And then the thought would always occur to me, while I'm here doing what I can do from my standpoint, I believe that my son has been freed up on the other side of the veil to do what he can do in that process.
Yeah.
In terms of maybe teaching the gospel and helping people to learn more about the Lord so they can live a happier existence and prepare for the eternities that lie ahead.
Maybe you guys kind of working as a team, but not really realizing it.
Exactly. I think we are working as a team.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Kind of to go along with that previous question of how it impacted your family relationships, how did it adjust your family long term within the last 15 years? Did it actually change any trajectory of your family? Different maybe activities you guys do together or adjust, or did it shift or change anything for the long term?
No, I don't know that we have picked up any new family traditions with the family or extended family as a result of this, other than when we go back to Sacramento, invariably we're going to find ourselves at his graveside.
Yeah. So he was buried in Sacramento.
He was buried in Sacramento, yeah. And I would go there very, very often.
Yeah.
It was right on the way home from work. So most days in the early going, I would stop by there and I would pray and I would talk to him, and I feel that he heard me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Why would a loving Heavenly Father not allow for my son, who's not physically with me, to understand how I feel?
Mm-hmm.
Because in God's holy plan for his children, who we are, he wants us to have family experiences. And why would he allow that to stop simply because he's in another realm?
Yeah.
And so I would pray with faith that I would have a little discussion. And before I had the discussion with my son, I would pray to Heavenly Father and say, please, Heavenly Father, if it be thy will, allow for my son and thy son to hear what I have to say to him today, because it's important to me.
Yeah.
And I'll talk things over. I'd tell him that I miss giving him blessings. I would give him counsel. I'm still his dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always will be. In the eternities, by Heavenly Father's plan, I believe that I can be, that I will be. So why discontinue some sort of link that I can have between me and him? That's my take on it. So it was helpful to me to process that whole thing, and I went by there very often.
That's cool that you were able to visit the grave so frequently. You also said that you had visited, you went the day after at the site there on right there by Wells, past Wells, Nevada. Then you went back with your wife also. Have you gone any other times to visit the actual accident site?
Yes. I went there about a month and a half ago.
Oh, wow.
Because we went out of state, right straight through the heart of Nevada, up to Meridian, Idaho for Thanksgiving with my wife's sister and my wife's brother-in-law. And our daughter, who was going to school at BYU, Idaho, drove the 4 hours from there to Meridian, and we all met there for Thanksgiving. And on the way home, I said to my wife, I want to go and get that stone that I put there a long time ago with his name on it. And so...
And you wanted to go find this one that you had engraven his name with
Yeah.
your dental tools.
And so I went there and there was about 6 inches of snow. So I brushed it away from the spot and I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
And I was crestfallen. I spent a whole hour there while Susie waited in the car and I couldn't find it. And so we're driving back and I was kind of complaining a little bit.
Yeah.
Not to God, I was complaining to my wife. I was saying, I can't believe that I couldn't find that stone. I know exactly where I put that. But here's the deal. I forgot that I had already gone to retrieve that stone about maybe 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
I forgot about it. But remember I said I write in my journal every day? So I went back to a time frame when we made a trip out to Salt Lake City, and I wrote in my journal that I've heard that someone in the family had tried to find this stone and they couldn't find it. I'm really worried that someone took it, so I'm going to go look for it.
Oh, wow.
There was also snow on the ground that day. And I had my son, Matthew, the firefighter, with me. And I said, I think I know where it is. And I walked to the spot. I brushed off a foot of snow, and there it was, right underneath where I brushed it.
Wow.
So I had made a replacement stone,
Yeah.
a smaller one, and I put it there as a memorial to him. And I took that one with me and took it home.
Oh, wow.
But I forgot about it. So I have it somewhere at home. And I've been looking for it, but I can't find it. But I know I have it.
Nice.
Because I wrote about that in my
Did
journal.
you find the replacement one there while you were there?
No, I didn't see the replacement
You
one.
didn't see the replacement one?
No. It was a smaller one, so it might have, maybe there was like a flood or something went through there and moved it or something. Yeah.
The thing that's a little bit crazy to me about this entire story of Ryan getting in this accident, not in the exact same spot, but in similar circumstances, my sister was driving a car from Idaho down into Utah, and she was by herself in the car. She was going to a wedding she was a photographer. She was going to go take pictures for this person's wedding. And she hit a tire tread in the middle of the freeway. And that threw her to the side. She tried to overcorrect, just like your son tried to overcorrect too quickly, too swiftly. And she ended up rolling her car 6 times.
Wow.
She was going 96 miles an hour, according to the
fast.
Yeah, she was going a little bit fast. But according to the State Patrol report, she rolled it 3 times and then it hit a barbed wire fence and rolled 3 times up this barbed wire fence. I was actually the one that took the phone call from the police officer. What ended up happening is when she came to a stop, she was still in the car. The windshield had actually been shoved down on to the steering wheel. The steering wheel was sticking through
the glass?
windshield. Yes, I've seen pictures of the vehicle, so I remember. And what she ended up doing is she had gone down, I think it was to the middle, but she had wrapped her hands around the steering wheel like this underneath and her head to the side. And so she was like crunched in there a little bit, but the steering wheel was sticking through the windshield. And when she came to a stop, the hazard lights were on for some reason at some point in all of that. And then there was dust everywhere. And with the yellow and the dust, she thought that the car was on fire. So, or was like going to be on fire or something. So she tried to get out as quickly as she could. She got out, and she got out before any other car had stopped. And so a car had stopped and said, "Who's in the car?" Because they just saw my sister outside. They're like, "Who's in the car?" She's like, "No, it was me." They're like, no, there's no way. Like, who's in the car? Because they could not believe that she survived.
Wow.
She ended up surviving. She had a cut on her pinky. She had whiplash. And I think there was one other cut, maybe like on her ear or something. But that was it. And so the thing to me that's incredible or irritating, I guess, is how could your son go through a very similar experience, overturning the car, and dies, right? And on the other hand, my sister goes through a similar experience and essentially walks away from this, what should have been a very like catastrophic accident.
Well, I'll give you my take on it.
Yeah.
And I believe this with my whole heart. I think that my son was needed by God on the other side of the veil. A lot's going on here, but a lot's going on there. And the work that's going on there is probably a lot more concentrated and focused than what we have here, because we are laden with a lot of distractions here in this life.
Yeah.
But a person on the other side of the veil who follows God can be released to do some powerful and mighty things. But by the same token, it could also be that your sister is needed here My brother was needed there. God
Your
controls those
son.
things. Yeah, my son was needed there, and your sister was needed here.
Yeah.
So it's all in the hands of God, and I have great faith that He has total control over everything that goes on. Of course, there are things that He just allows to happen.
Yeah.
But I think what we see happening in life in terms of life and death are a lot of decisions that are made by our Heavenly Father because He has a great plan going on. And it's ongoing, and it happens here and it happens there. And so, and as an example, I'm going to give you a prime example.
Yeah.
I had a mild MI in 2014. It came as a total surprise to me because I've been working out daily.
As a
Myocardial infarction and heart attack.
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I had
Okay.
I had a heart attack in the what's called the Widowmaker. Okay.
Ooh, that's a
And it was 95% occluded. And I had been having some symptoms of shortness of breath, and I felt like I was getting worn out going up a flight of stairs a little while before this happened. If I'd go on a bike ride with a family member, I said, this shouldn't be this hard, But I had the myocardial infarct, and so I was on the east side of the Sierras with my daughter, Emily. We were on vacation. The family was elsewhere, and we were going on a workout. So she was running, and I was on my mountain bike. And there's a lot of hefty hills there on the east side of the Sierras leading up to Mount Whitney.
Yeah.
We're on the Mount Whitney Portal Road, they call it. And it goes up and up and up and up and up. And so we were going up that hill, and by about 10 minutes into it, I said, I feel so tired. And I said, Emily, I can't go anymore. I normally can handle a hill like this on my bike, but let's turn around. So we turned around. The mere act of coasting down the hill and using my hands on the brakes was so fatiguing to me.
wow.
And then I knew the signs of a heart attack, and I knew that I was having one. So I pulled my bike off to the side of the road, and I said to my daughter, I said, Emily, I don't want to scare you, but your dad's having a heart attack. And I said, I just want to lay down on the ground. She said, Dad, don't lay down. Sit down and lean against my legs. So she dials my wife. Before we left to go to that Whitney Portal Road for this rendezvous for us to leave my wife and go up and have the workout and then meet her like an hour and a half later, before we left the hotel, my wife left our car inexplicably. We were getting ready to leave. She said, wait, I need to go get something. She told me later that the Spirit of God wrought upon her in a powerful way and said, go get your baby aspirin.
Huh.
So she didn't tell me what it was, but she went into the hotel room to get the baby aspirin,
Yeah.
right? So then we have this experience. So she was summoned to me and got there within minutes of our daughter calling her because they weren't too far away. They were with our daughter-in-law and with our grandchildren, our two grandchildren of our daughter-in-law's daughters. And they came up to us, and my wife immediately gave me these two aspirins.
Yeah.
And it helped me somewhat fairly quickly.
Wow.
And so I went down to a little hospital there they had in Lone Pine, California. And I went in through the rear of the hospital, and they directed me to go to the right place. And it was where they had a lot of elderly people, like in wheelchairs. And I was in that part of the hospital, and it was kind of bizarre. And I said, I'm having a heart attack. Universal sign is when you're having a heart attack, you want to contain the pain. And I was containing the pain by having my hand over my chest, just like this. And she was so nonchalant about it. She said, well, just go down there where you see that one sign there, then you turn left, you turn right, and you'll be in emergency. I was like, are you going to help me out or anything? I'm having a heart attack. So I walked on my own accord there, and they gave me some drugs, and I tried to talk it off as being, altitude sickness, because I was denying that at that point in time when I was laid down by the doctor. And he
You never
said,
want to say like I'm having a heart attack and then find out you're not having a heart
Yeah.
attack,
It
right?
could be embarrassing.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, right? Or like my bone's broken and then it's not broken. So
Right.
you always want to like shy on
Downplay.
the
No, you're good.
yeah.
So, yeah, the doctor, I said, maybe it's altitude sickness. I was hoping against hope that it wasn't a heart attack, but I
Yeah.
kind of knew it was.
Yeah.
And he said, no, you're having a heart attack. He said, within 2 days, you're going to have a stent in one of the arteries in your heart. I can tell you right now that's what's going to happen. And that's what happened. So that's a long story, but I was going back to the other principle that I was trying to get across, and that's this. One of my counselors in the stake presidency, 3 months after we were released, he died of a heart attack. Okay? we had a man who served as my executive secretary, who I felt a strong impression should be the next bishop in a certain ward in our state. He served the better part of 3 years, and then he died of a heart attack.
Oh, wow.
He was a chimney sweep, but he died of a heart attack. The mayor of our city, who was a member of our ward, died of a heart attack. And there was one other brother who had served as bishop in our stake who had a heart attack, and they all died.
What the heck?
And I lived.
You have a heart attack epidemic going on over there.
Yeah, what's
Okay.
going on in California?
So the Lord needed them
It's
on the
in
other
and out.
side.
It's not Whataburger. You guys should have been eating at Whataburger.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it all depends on what Heavenly Father wants.
The reason why I bring that up is I think sometimes, like especially where I'm at in like a timeline, it's really hard to hear that, right? Or really, really hard to hear like there's a greater plan or there's a bigger picture or like it's really hard.
I totally get it. And I
Yeah.
felt the same way in the early going. It was hard. You know, I accepted it. I never got angry. You asked about that. I never tried to bargain or anything. I accepted it.
Was there any coping mechanisms that you used, like in the early aftermath, like therapy or even just groups? They have different groups for parents that have lost children. Anything to that effect, or
Well, I was aware of that, and I might have taken advantage of that kind of an opportunity if I hadn't been so dang busy.
yeah,
But I was working on a 4-day work week. I was working about 38 hours per week in my dental practice. Then on top of that, as a stake president, it would vary from week to week, but on average about 20 to 25 hours per week doing that.
yeah.
So if you add those two numbers together, that's more than a full-time job would be. And so I don't think that I really had time to seek for some of maybe the outside help that I could have taken advantage of. But again, I was serving, and in some way that helped to assuage some of that grief that I was going through.
Yeah.
Because when you're actively, teaching a principle to someone, if you're actually counseling with someone about something hard that they're going through in your calling, then for at least momentarily, you're not going to have this huge weight.
You don't have a huge
your
worry about
shoulders.
what's going on.
Yeah, it goes away in the same way that sometimes if you're sleeping, you'll have a happy dream. So it's not like a constant thing, but it was fairly constant in the early going.
What about physical stuff of like doing exercise and things like that? The reason why I asked this question is because you had said that Ryan, you used to lift weights together and do things like that. So there was a tie to him there. And even the weights, you said, I left them on there for a while. Like I didn't want to take them off. Was it hard for you to do some of those activities that you had done with Ryan previously of like working out or lifting or doing any of those things that help with some mental health?
I continued working out. And when I worked out, I fancied, although it may not have been true, I fancied that he's probably watching me right now. So I'm going to show him I'm trying to get stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think probably your journaling and even just going to the gravesite like every day is also therapeutic and good coping mechanisms as well.
Absolutely.
Did it take a while to be able to go do one of those reptile trips again back to West Texas? Or was it just the next year, then the timing came up again and you just went again because that's what you had always been doing?
No, because I had not yet established any hunting patterns like that with either of my twin sons or with our daughter Emily.
Yes.
And so I think I went with Ryan the last of our 9 trips was in 2007.
Yeah.
The next trip I made was in 2012 with our my twin sons. So
5
there's a
years,
5-year period of time that I didn't go back to Texas.
Yeah.
I probably would have enjoyed doing it in some fashion, but I didn't want to go by myself.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I totally get it.
Yeah.
Where would you say you are now in your journey of healing?
Happy.
Okay. Do you feel like you're completely healed or that, yeah.
Yes. I'm happy. I'm joyful. And if you would have told me, like in months 1, 2, and 3, when I shared some of those experiences about wanting to get away from the Christmas party and kneeling and praying and saying, I just can't do this church service tonight, I would have had a hard time then fathoming that the day would come that I would have peace in my heart over this. But remember that one scripture that came to me when I was composing something on the guitar, and the Spirit said, put down the guitar, and it came.
Yeah.
And that scripture teaches that after the days of mourning and fasting. And I did fast a lot, not necessarily because I wanted to fast to be more spiritual. I just wasn't hungry.
Yeah.
And I was already fairly thin as it was at the time because I was doing a lot of running and things and lifting. And I lost like 10 pounds in a week and a half.
Oh, wow.
I ate minimally. I was eating just to stay alive, but there's nothing that I enjoyed. My favorite food would not have tasted good to me. I wouldn't have said, oh, this is great, I love it. I was just kind of putting it down the hatch just to, have energy to do what I needed to do at work or at church.
Yeah.
So, but it said after the days of fasting and grief that peace will come to the land, or to the land of the Smith family specifically. That was a direct message from heavenly realms.
Yeah.
That was a beam of light that was just shot to me from on high. And so I was given hints early on that things were going to be okay. And like I said, I feel happy and joyful now. But back then, I had a hard time envisioning that day would very easily come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I making sense on that?
Yeah, definitely.
I hope.
I assume it would, based off my experience and based off talking to other people, it's really hard, especially with even in that first year, to even understand what your life's going to look like in 2 months and 6 months and in 15 years. I don't think you ever were like, oh, I can see what I would be like in 15 years. Like I still can't. I don't know what 6 months looks like. I don't know what a year looks like. And even in a year, I don't think I'm going to know what 10 years is going to look like. I don't know.
Yeah. I totally agree, because in the early going, remember I said that in my journal shortly after he passed away, I said, I feel like I've been sucker punched. Now, I'm not saying anything. I'm not complaining to God. I'm just saying, like, if I were to be sucker punched really hard in my midsection, like some people, they say, I can't breathe. And it could be a medical emergency if a person gets hit and gets a blow to the torso really hard. It can knock them out and cause a lot of problems. So I did write in my journal, as I said earlier, I feel like I've been sucker punched and I just can't get my breath back. When did I get my breath back? Somewhere there, maybe like in the first year. I'm not sure exactly when, but I got to the point where I could have at least a few normal moments every day.
Yeah.
But my mind invariably would drift back to missing serving my son.
Yeah.
And I missed giving him blessings. I missed talking with him. I missed going on rides with him. A favorite place to eat was Adalberto's. And I used to go there and get the Mexican food. And he just loved it. He would just chow down. That kid, he could eat a lot. He was 6'2". He was a big guy.
Yeah.
But we just had all these things that we would do together. And so it's the abrupt cessation of something that you love doing with someone that you love.
Yeah.
And that's part of the grief. It's not just that they're not there physically, but you miss doing things with them and you miss serving them.
Yeah.
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 Well, thank you very much for taking the time just to share your story and to share a little bit about Ryan. And hopefully it helps all the different people that are listening.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining us on the Lost Child podcast. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe. And remember, shine bright, and we'll see you in the next episode.